सबको नमस्ते, जय श्री राम, everybody. I am going to cover some of the things after Ashutosh Bhai said I was preparing for few of the things. Okay, we make a serial in Bharat Marg called Real Sikh History The Untold. Some of the time it is not comfortable for everybody. I am not going to cover the area about Bhagat Singh which everybody knows, right? So I am going to cover the area which nobody talks about. Is that okay with you? Okay, so don't blame me if I am not covering some of the heroic acts. Okay, that's not my intention here. Okay, now many time people talk about Bhagat Singh, which is great. Balidani Bhagat Singh. I am a Hindu. I don't call Shahid Diwas. I don't say Shahid. That is not mine. Okay, and I call it as Balidani Diwas, Balidani Bhagat Singh. Okay, and but many time what people miss out conveniently is his guru was Chandrasekhar Azad. Okay, that people don't want to say because probably he displaced more Hinduism with the Janev, so they don't want to say his guru is Chandrasekhar Azad. Okay, and in fact he did loot and everything, and also bomb doing, everything was done with the help and under the instruction of Chandrasekhar Azad. Okay, so who was a big revolutionary at that time. Okay, and only one thing he didn't take his word was he never liked to get surrender. Chandrasekhar Azad's principle was, I will kill myself but I will not get in the hands of the British alive. Okay, other thing is, do you know Bhagat Singh had a Janev function done? Do you know that? There was a big grand Janev function for Bhagat Singh where they put the Janev for him. Okay, which was attended by all his uncles. In fact, one of his uncle who was on exile in Iran, okay, by name Ajit Singh, Sardar Ajit Singh, was also attending that. Okay, there he comes and gives the discourse on the patriotism to the young kid. Okay, what is patriotism? What is Bharat means to him, and what is Bharat means to him and family. Okay, and that is where he gets a feeling of patriotism. So his Janev function is one of the very important aspect of his life, because later on he goes to say that's where he got the inspiration from his uncle. Okay. And in fact his grandfather Arjun Singh was a nationalist at heart too. Okay, when it was time for the two brothers to be given a character Janev, Arjun Singh announced to the people gathered, I have decided to prepare these boys to serve the nation. They will sacrifice their lives for the country. While Jagat Singh fell ill on the next year, and the words of his grandfather came true on 1931. Okay, so his Janev function is one of the very, very important aspect of Bhagat Singh's Balidani Bhagat Singh's life, but it gets conveniently missed. Okay, and also if you see his life history, for whom he did all the protest started was for Lala Lajpat Rai. Okay, so many of the people who say, oh, we are separate, they make him a communist hero. I'm going to say you how the communist historic writers took him conveniently, whereas he had no agendas which was pretty similar to them. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, and so seeking a revenge on Lala Lajpat Rai Singh, they assassinated under the guidance of Chandrasekhar Azad, John Sanders, the British police officer. Okay, so from there only his revolutionary life starts, all the going behind the British and everything. Okay, very interesting fact of his life. Okay, Bhagat Singh did not attend Khalsa High School in Lahore. Okay, very important thing to note. Bhagat Singh did not attend Khalsa High School in Lahore, as his grandfather did not approve of the school. School officials who are loyal virtues to the British authorities. Okay, so his family said Khalsa High School managed by the British Stooges. Okay, it's not me. Please don't blame me. Okay, it's his grandfather. If you want to blame somebody. Okay, and his father, everybody. They said so. Then they went on to enroll him to the Dayanand Anglo-Vedic High School, which is an Arya Samaji school. This is another important aspect of his life. Okay, even before the assembly bombing, Bhagat Singh went to Calcutta with his Durga Babi, one of the family which supported him very, very closely. And she takes him because he was British were searching for him, so she took him in the train with her kid. Okay, and also on that day he stayed in Arya Samaj temple. He didn't stay anywhere else. He stayed in Arya Samaj temple because he went there to collect chemicals and all. First time trip to Calcutta to make bomb. Okay, and many people didn't give it, so he gets to know how to where to get and how to find the sympathizers, etc. And then he stayed with the famous trustee of Arya Samaj, okay, Chajuramji. And wherever he went, he never said his name was Bhagat Singh. Of course, the British was searching for him. He introduced himself with the name Hari to everyone. Okay, he didn't add a Keshdari. He was not a Keshdari. Okay, so he introduced his name as Hari to everybody. Okay, and if you want to know where the reference is coming from, this coming from Miss Virender Sindhu's on a book on a Bhagat Singh. It is written on page number 176. The popular photograph of Sardar Bhagat Singh wearing a hat was also taken during the Calcutta visit. During the he goes there a couple of times, okay, to Calcutta. It is written in the book that Bhagat Singh was mentally prepared to throw a bomb in the assembly. So when he left from Calcutta, Shushila Didi decorated his forehead by putting a tilak was put on to Bhagat Singh with her blood. This was done under the Arya Samaj temple and given Audio's farewell for his for this grand hero of an immortal but final words of sacrifice of the Kejriwal kind of communist leaning people, how they bend the history is unbelievable. Okay, and nowadays you see Kejriwal going and only one thing he didn't do is he didn't call him his own uncle. Otherwise he is doing everything for Bhagat Singh. So that is okay. If people respect him, that is good because he deserves that respect. But his history we are talking about, which is hidden. Okay, we are talking about real Sikh history that is untold. We are not covering about the one which is told. I was saying you that Sushila Devi decorated his forehead with a tilak with her blood under the Arya Samaj roof. Okay, and they all gave him a grand welcome to go and succeed. Okay, now the natural question arises here that when Bengal was the seat of Marxism, okay, you have to understand, Bengal is the seat of Marxism, right? Everybody knows it, right? But there is no reference in Bhagat Singh's books or any writing that he met any Marxist leader there at all. Okay, he is going to the heart of the Marxist hub, but he is not meeting any Marxist leaders. So what does it say to you? His close relationship with Kejriwal and his groups. Kejriwal was not there by that time. Marxist groups. Why he didn't meet any Marxist leaders? Why? The simple answer to this is Bhagat Singh was not a communist. Rather, he was a Arya Samaji. But he was confused at that age. Okay, he was confused. He was brought up with the Arya Samaj thing, and while going for hanging, he had a lot of questions. Okay, whether God is really there. We all go through in our 20s. That the same thing what he was going through. Death of you go through the thing. People put the lathi on the back. Lathi is this big. That's how they beat you, that's how they put inside you, and those things, that kind of creates a mental instability and things like that. And he was really questioning, whether really God is there, which is very appropriate at at the time where he was. He did not believe in superstitious ideology, hypocrisy, and because of this, some people consider him as a atheist. In fact, he goes on to say in one of the books he written, okay, he says about his atheism. Okay, but let's go there. And another one important thing, Mahatma Gandhi elaborated his stand on Bhagat Singh and the revolutionary violence at the Karachi session of Congress 3 days after the execution of Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru. You must know, this is what Gandhi said. Okay, this is what Gandhi said. Please note, this is not my word. Okay, you must know that it is against my creed to punish even a murderer, even a thief or a dacoit. Okay, that means Gandhi says, even though he could have been a murderer, even though he could have been a thief, even though he could have been a dacoit, okay, still my heart pains with the execution of it. Okay, because he had a soft heart, that's why he was feeling that. Okay, so okay, so hope you get it. Okay, and in fact, some of the things this you might have known, that they go and say, when we are dead, there would be still patriotism left in us. Even my corpse will emit fragrances on my motherland. That's a thing you would have heard. And do you know that Bhagat Singh had a record of holding the highest number of hunger strike, highest number of days, 112 days. Who he did the hunger strike against is very, very interesting. He did against British and Congress. Hello? He did against British and Congress. Okay? And nobody will say these things to you. Okay? And then Nehru goes there and meets him and accepts some of his agendas and says no to many of them, and then they sit in hunger strike again. In fact, they sit for hunger strike for 112 days for precise, which is a record even today. And in fact, after they were hanged, one of the requests they had was, we are not criminals, said Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru. They said, we are not criminals. Okay, we should not be hanged. They said, you should bullet us, you fire us, don't hang us, was one of the requests they had, which was rejected by both Congress as well as by the British. And they were hanged, and after they were hanged, their body was cut into pieces. Okay, and they were packed and they were dragged in a sack through the dirty trash going door, because outside the people were waiting, so they didn't want to get caught, and they threw it in the Satluj river. Okay, so that's another thing. Now, Bhagat Singh was never a practicing Sikh. He did not follow anything so-called precepts of Sikh faith. As per his own writings, he also rejected the Arya Samaj beliefs, which he grew up in the later stage. That's exactly what I said before. He grew up with the Arya Samaj faith, which also he rejected, saying that I don't believe in anything now. Okay, I would encourage people to read Bhagat Singh's own word, which I am going to go through in next 5 minutes. I will be done. Okay, this is exactly my state of affairs. It's not my vanity or my friends. It's not because many of the friends put pressure on him. In fact, the Jathedars, Gurudwara has Jathedars, right? The British sent Jathedars to say him to call himself a Sikh. This is exactly my state of affair. You don't interfere, he says. It is not my vanity. It is not my friends. It is my mode of thinking and has made me an atheist. I am not a Sikh, he says. I made an atheist. I don't know whether in my case of belief, God is and offering daily prayers, which I consider to be most selfish and degraded. So he goes here to say, because if you go through I am going to go through in next 5 minutes, I will finish the thing by saying, some of the thing written by Bhagat Singh, okay, which is not in our history book at all. This is Bhagat Singh writing. I rather was a boy with a very shy nature, who had certain pessimistic deception about the future career, and in my those days I was not perfect atheist. My grandfather, under whose influence I was brought up, is an orthodox Arya Samaji. He calls his grandfather as an orthodox Arya Samaji. Okay, as an Arya Samajist, is anything but an atheist. After finishing my primary education, I have joined in DAV School of Lahore and stayed in the boarding house for full 1 year. Okay, please listen to this very carefully. Okay, this is Bhagat Singh for you. Okay, thereapart, he says, when I stayed in the boarding school, after my morning and evening prayers, I used to recite Gayatri Mantra for hours and hours. Hello, this is Bhagat Singh for you. You had to go and see in the Golden Temple, to see if the Gayatri Mantra is being chanted there. Okay, maybe they do. Okay, apart from morning and evening prayers, I used to recite Gayatri Mantra for hours and hours together. And this story is about Bhai Randir converting him to Sikhism. Okay, Bhai Randir and the Jathedars there, they find him out because his name and fame has become so this thing. They think that he will become a great asset for Sikhism to promote that cause. So they are kind of working on, they cannot change the date, nothing. They know he is going to get executed, but only thing they want was at the end of the day, he has to be converted into a Sikh. Okay, that was their agenda so that they can carry him as a hero. Also, the story is about by Randir converting him to Sikhism in jail is also not true. Okay, the Sikh says he got converted in the jail into Sikhism. Okay, which is not true because of these things. You can see this is written by Bhagat Singh. Okay, society has to fight on this belief as well as fight on the idol worship, that is deity worship. He was against. Naturally, he was Arya Samaji. He was not for deity worship. Right. Similarly, the man tries to stand on his own legs and became a realist. He also have to throw the faith aside. It is not my vanity, my friends, it is the mode of thinking that I have that has made me an atheist. Okay, and let us see how I carry on. One friend asked me to pray. That is the Bhai Randir. Okay, Bhai Randir Singh. He goes there, he finds him with the help of the Jathedars, and he says him to convert to Sikhism. And so that's what he is writing about. Let us see how I carried on. One friend asked me to pray. When I informed him about my atheism, he said, during the last days you will have to begin to believe. I said, no, dear sir, I shall not be. He says, till today I didn't pray, and all of a sudden, because of the death fear, if I start praying, that is a selfishness, he says. Okay, that's what he says. I will think to be an act of degradation and demoralization of my part. For selfish motives, I am not going to pray. Readers and friends, is this vanity if it is not? Okay, in fact, Bhai Randir Singh goes on to say, okay, he was working in the jail, in the Lahore jail between 1930 to 31. Shivarma's, in this book he says, Bhai Randir Singh was God-fearing, religious man. It pained him to learn that Bhagat Singh was a non-believer. So somehow managed to see Bhagat Singh in the closed cell and try to convince him about the existence of God, but failed. Baba lost his temper then. Okay, the Randir Singh, he became very angry and taunted him, saying, you are giddy with fame. You have developed an ego which is standing like a black curtain between you and the God. It was in the reply and the remarks of Balidani Bhagat Singh wrote in this article. Okay, so this is Bhagat Singh for you folks, Balidani Bhagat Singh. Okay, so hope you got the message. This comes under the title in Bharat Marg, the real Sikh history, the untold. Okay, hope you enjoyed. Hare Krishna.